Hey, greetings guitar players, Brownsound tone chasers, dwellers of the Vale of YouTube. It's your boy Martin Smith back with a little bit more Brownsound tone chasing. If you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know I'm sort of obsessed with Edward Van Halen's Brownsound. It's left a mark on me that I just can't get rid of. It's a benchmark for what a great rock guitar sound should sound like, in my head at least, and probably in yours too if you're watching this. The thing is, I want to capture that sound more as an academic exercise, maybe as a soul-searching, but not in any way so I can become Edward Van Halen. It's not about that for me. I'm a music producer by daytime, and my clients will come to me and they'll say, hey, we want to get this drum sound from a Motown record, or, you know, we want this clap sound from an 80s pop record, or whatever it is. And my job is to summon up those sounds as convincingly as possible, because for my money, like, sound is the second biggest evocator of memory and emotion, second to smell. Smell's the first one. Like, you're in a supermarket and you'll smell the smell that your mother wore when you were a child, and it'll send you back into that kind of like headspace. And so when you hear a sound that you remember from your childhood or from any period, it'll take you right back there, and you'll really feel it quite strongly. It'll have a resonance for you. And that's what the Brownsound's got for me. I first heard Edward play guitar probably when I was aged 11 or 12. I think it would have either been the first album or A Bit of Women and Children First. Because both of those albums were in my friend's record collection, and straight off it's like nothing sounded like that. It redefined what a rock guitar should be, and it brought with it a massive amount of contradiction, and this is something I think we should discuss. So contradiction in Ed's playing is massive. So for instance, people will say that Ed's guitar sound was really saturated, and then they'll say it's not, it's quite clean. Both of those things seem to be true. People will say it's very bright, but then they'll say it's really warm and tony. Both of those things seem to be true as well. And it's trying to work out how these contradictions play out in real life, because they're real. You know, it is possible to describe Ed as very middly, and then other people could describe his guitar sound as having a scoop in the middle. So these are the contradictions we're dealing with Edward Van Halen, and probably why it's so damn difficult to get anywhere near to his guitar sound. But it keeps us going, you know, and I don't claim to have got anywhere close to his sound, really. I'm going down various avenues to try and summon up the beast, my love for Van Halen that's taking me down these avenues. Some of them will lead to amazing new pastures, and some of them will be dead ends. And I don't know till I've gone down them. I'm sharing them with you because I hope you'll enjoy the journey. But I think probably the journey is more enjoyable than the destination. We'll see. So with that in mind, I'm just going to clear the decks today. You might have seen videos where I've used a Bray head, Bray Coco 50. I was enjoying that. I've recently done a video where I'm using the Marshmallow, the 1 amp, really enjoying that. Both are getting me results, but I've heard some information from a source that was close to Van Halen, or at least had contact with people who had his gear at various times. And there's a lot of talk about Bandmasters, a lot of talk. And my friend has got a kind of a Bandmaster circuit amp. It's the Fender Tremolux. But apart from the solid state rectifier, the circuit is the same as the Bandmaster, if you use channel 1, I think. So I'm going to do some experimenting with that today. I'm going to use the Tremolux, and I'm going to slave that into my GT Trio and Dual 75 power amp. I've tried to slave the Tremolux into various amps. I've tried my JCM 800, which has got a send and return, so I could just plug it straight into the return and use that as a power amp. That was okay, but not really it. I plugged it into a 4-hole 50 watt. Again, pretty good, but not quite it. And then I tried it into the Dual 75 power amp. Yeah, not bad. Didn't have that secondary bloom that Running with the Devil's got. Dun, dun, didn't have that bloom. So then I plugged it into the preamp that comes with the Groove Tube setup, the Trio preamp, on its mean channel. Dialed back a bit, not really super distorted or anything like that. That was getting me a lot closer. And so I thought I'd share it with you because with a few little tweaks along the way that Dom would have done to the sound, tiny EQ tricks and obviously the reverb, I'm really into this. It sounds pretty good. It's got a similar level of gain to Edward's, I think, which is very interesting. And then along this route, I'm going to also plug the signal through the DI output of the power amp. So we're going to get the speaker signals, of which there are two. Both of these are my greenback cab with SM57s. There are two of them on the greenback cab on different speakers. One of them's dead on the cone and the other one is pointing at the side paper of the cone, which is apparently the Don Landy angle that he used to use. So one of them gives you a warmer sound, slightly off axis, and the other one gives you a pretty dead on, kind of harsh, straight sound. And then you blend those two things together. So that's going on. But also, if you've ever listened to Ed and maybe used a graphic EQ to analyse his sound, there's a weird thing that happens at the top of the frequency range. So if you listen to greenback cabs, their frequency roll-off starts at about 5k and goes in a slope down to maybe 10k. That's the frequency range of a greenback. Now, some people will say that that's where Ed used JBLs, and the JBLs will get you a lot closer to that top end. But I'm not really into that JBL theory at the moment. So I wanted to try other avenues, and the other avenue I'm working on at the moment is the principle that he used a DI signal. Don took a DI signal from a lot of his artists back in the days. No reason to suspect he didn't do that with Ed as well. So I'm working on that principle that there's a DI signal buried in. And when you use that DI signal, you'll notice that you've got suddenly a bit of high frequency information that a greenback doesn't give you. Just a little extended bottom shelf, sort of up to 10, 12k, full of, extra information and magic. So I'll be showing you what that sounds like as well. So without further ado, let's get into the amp. And so I'm starting off with this guitar. It's my Epiphone Explorer, which is, sold as Carina. I know everyone will say that's just African limber or whatever it is. I don't care. Sounds great. So really nice body, pretty good neck. I think I need a refret, but it's an Epiphone. And the humbucker on there is one that I got. It's a vintage Super70. So theoretically what comes in Ed's guitar, and maybe what he used on the first album and beyond. Maybe same as he used when he borrowed Chris Holmes's guitar, but we don't really know. But the Super70 is amazing. When I bought that, it was completely wired wrongly. It was out of phase and everything was incorrect. And I reached out to my buddy Jim Gaustad. Hi, Jim. And he pointed me in the right direction to remap all the wiring using like a meter and stuff like that. And I'm pretty happy with it now. It's working correctly. Sounds bright, high output, but kind of clear. Pretty Edward, I'd say. So very happy with the pickup. Other than that, I just took the scratch plate off to look like the one that Chris Holmes had. Put some Stratocaster knobs on there because they're really easy to turn. Looks like it's for aesthetic reasons, but they're really super fast as opposed to the Gibson-y Epiphone ones that came with it. Other than that, that's the guitar. That's all that's going on. So I'm plugging out of the guitar into an Icarus clean boost. My theory is that Ed had the Echoplex. First, he had some other pedals, but they weren't gain pedals. But the Echoplex did have the option of making some extra gain to the signal. And I think that would have been used a little bit just to push into the first amp. So I've got this, this Icarus clean boost doing a similar thing. It's just taking a bit of treble off and it's just adding a tiny little bit more push. But, it's minuscule. It's really nothing you'd go, oh yeah, that's a boost. It's tiny. But I think the Fender likes a little push into it. So that Fender amp I'm plugged into the first input on channel 1, and I've got the volume and the treble on full, the bright switch is off, and the bass is on 4. Okay, so it's not overly flubbed, but it's just presenting its output in its, full operation. There's also a no feedback switch on the back, which takes away the negative feedback. Negative feedback, if you're aware of what it does, is it combines an out-of-phase signal with the in-phase signal inside the amp with the desired aim of trying to reduce a little bit of distortion. That's Fender for you. Distortion? Who wants that? We do. So with that switch, you can just put back the signal to its sort of like usual strength. So that's the amp. So out the back of the Fender, I've plugged the speaker line into a Bray DI box, and then the line continues into a cab that's matched to the amp. So the amp's fully loaded, but it provides a tap at line level from that signal. And that's what I use then to plug into a slave amp. All right. Now, before it goes to the slave amp, I've just plugged in a graphic EQ. I think Ed did this as well. He sculptured the sound after the first head before it went into the second one. He would often boost mids going into the first head, and I think he would then subtract them before going into the slave head. It was like a technique that's used in recording a lot, which is called pre-emphasis. So in the days of tape, when tape didn't give you a lot of treble response, you'd push a lot of treble into the tape, and then you'd take it off at some point. But it was better to have it going onto tape to push the signal into the tape. And I'm using a similar principle. So I've got a pushed guitar sound with a bit of middle going into the first amp, and then I've got a tiny little scoop in the middle, maybe the 1K area, before it goes into the second amp. All right? You with me so far? Okay. So that signal then goes into the preamp, the Groove Tubes Trio preamp, into the mean channel, the middle gain channel, and it's set to sort of I guess you'd say a moderately middly sounding JTM 45 stroke AC 30 sort of level of gain. Nothing crazy. And the EQs are very, very active when you use it in this capacity. So I've backed off the middle a touch, and everything else is sort of at 4. It's kind of basic. That trio then goes into the Groove Tubes power amp. This is a dual 75 power amp, so it's got 2 stereo sides of it. I'm just using one of the sides, and it's got 6L6s, similar to, I know Ed used the Sylvania valves, 6CA7s, which I do have in channel B, but they're kind of spongy. But the 6L6s in there really do work nice. They kind of muscular and a little bit sort of clean and chimey. So those are the power valves. The amp's set to stun, and the presence is on middle. So that's what happens in the power amp. Out of that power amp goes into my cab, which has got 4 greenback Celestians, and I've got 2 mics on 2 of the speakers. One's dead on in the centre of the cone. The other one's doing a tilt, the Don Landy tilt, which is somewhere at the paper of the cone. So it's off axis, gets a slightly warmer, less direct sound. And then you blend those 2 things together. Now there is an extra signal that I'm using. So the power amp also has a DI output, which contains the entire sound of that rig, pretty much everything but the speakers. And it will allow me to take that signal and plug it into the desk, which is what I'm doing. Because I'm pretty sure that there's a high-end constituent part to Ed's tone on a lot of those first albums that you just can't get through greenbacks. My friend Ozzy Arson, who built an amp for me, he's done a lot of research into the DI signal, and he's pretty certain that that exists in the Van Halen sound. But you guys make up your own mind. I'm just offering this as a sort of an interesting option. So I'm recording all of those signals now. And let's have a little look at a classic you might have heard of before. So that's what we're getting when we're plugged in through all the signals. And I'll break it down now. So this is what you get when you just listen to the DI signal. Let's mute the amp. So it's kind of a weird flat cardboardy sound with loads of high end. but it sort of gives you that synthesized constant sound. It's an interesting thing. You certainly wouldn't want to play a gig with that or record it on its own. If I take that away now and just show you the greenback cabs. So back with the DI into the bargain. Yeah, so that's what it's sounding like. What I would say about that is that it brings into mind the treble response that Ed got. It was super bright, and yet it didn't hurt your ears. How did that happen? Well, I've got a feeling that that's when Don got involved. So everyone said that his sound was pretty bright in the studio. I think Michael Anthony commented on the recording of the first Van Halen album, and he was asked about the guitar sound. Yeah, it was pretty bright, he said. So with that in mind, I think the original signal was then attenuated in the high end by Don Landy. Don was obviously a great engineer, and he knew what your ears liked to hear. So the theory with hearing is that we're most susceptible to sounds between about 1 and 3K. And that's actually the frequency that the guitar lives at. So if you want to make the guitar, especially when it gets distorted, if you want to make it more palatable to the ear, what you can do is you can start to take away a little bit of the 1 to 3K region where it's hottest and just dip it down a little bit, and it'll start to hurt the ears less. Let's hear some other tunes with the same setup and see if we're digging this amount of gain and treble. Oh, big thank you to Alan Garber, who sent me a Peterson strobe tuner. Alan, you're the Don. I've used this. I'm currently in running with the Devil tuning, so when I play other songs, I'm afraid I might be slightly out of tune. But the tuner's amazing, and the presets that Alan has written for the tuner are incredible. What a legacy of work that Alan's left, so that everyone can just go and tune to the songs. It's a really cool thing that he's done for the guitar community, as well as its transcriptions. So massive thank you to Alan Garber. Okay, back with the Strat. Should we try a bit of Hang 'em High?
Cool, so I think this is showing us that you don't need a high gain amp with loads of preamp gain to do this. You could just plug one amp into another. And why not go for amps that Ed had, which is the way that it was done in the 70s sometimes, undercover, in secret. Nobody knew about it. But, you know, a cleanish Fender amp with a bit of grank plugged into a Marshall, that's going to do something special. I haven't got the effects plugged in, but you get a feel that's kind of getting this. So now we've captured the guitar sound, why don't we go into the box and see what sort of post trickery we need to do. There's not a lot of it, but there's a couple of touches that we need. We need the reverbs from Sunset Sound, and we need something to sculpt a little bit of the harsh treble away and maybe add a little bit of top end to the sound again. Both of these things are standard mixing techniques, so it wouldn't be very unusual that Don did this on Ed's guitar, especially because the guitar is a harsh, high-frequency instrument, and you don't want all that kind of like 1 to 3K thing killing your ears. So let's have a look inside the box now, and we'll chat about what's done there. So what you'll see on the screen here is I've got 2 tracks, and you've got the greenback cab, which is a composite of the on-axis 57 mic and then the off-axis 57 mic summed together in the desk here, the recording console, and then they're grouped together as a stereo file, and that's what we can hear right just here. Okay. And then the next track down says Tremolux Groove Tubes DI. So this is the DI signal coming out of the final power amp. Right, there's hardly anything there, is there? Let's turn this up a little bit. So that's your DI signal. It's quite flat, quite cardboard boxy, if that's the sound you can imagine. But it does have this sort of top end which is unusual and a bit synthesized. So let's turn that back down to the mix level we had it at, which is almost off. And put them both back together. Yeah? Alright, that's what's going on there then. But we have employed a few little plugins along the way, so let me show you what I've done. On the greenback cab here, I've put an EQ which is doing what I see on Edward's spectral analysis. If you put like spectral EQ on Edward's guitar tracks, you'll see that there's a massive steep drop at 10k. It's almost like a brick wall, sort of just exclusion of all frequencies above that. So it's quite unusual. So I've done that, and then I've bussed the 2 guitar signals together into a group here and put a few bits and bobs on that. So the first thing I've put on is just a gentle bit of
sort of gentle bit of low end lift, and then there's a tiny little dip there at 2k, so that's trying to take out the stingy frequencies. Another one there at 8k, again taking out a little bit of sting, and then a gentle roll off at the top. Now that whole EQ is only working at 58% strength, so it's a real subtle bit of sort of coloration, if you like. It's not changing the world at all. Then it goes into a Pultec. Now this is the clever bit, right? So if you use the MEQ Pultec EQ real unit, if you can, or plug-in, there's a dip frequency. This is what it's going to take out. The more you increase that level, you're actually going to take a dip out of the sound, and you can choose the frequency. Now I've got this set to 4k, so 4k is a bit harsh, and I've decided to dip a bit out. And then I've also boosted a little bit at 8k. 8k is kind of excitement frequency, so I've decided to boost that a little. And you can see I've attenuated the low end a little bit with this one, but I'm going to take that back. I don't want to attenuate it too much. Further to that, there's a tiny bit of a lift here, which is what you'd get when you master a track. You'd usually try to bring out some more treble in the track. So I've done that so it matches the backing tracks that have been recorded. Only other thing here is 1176, and this is riding some of the bumps and pumps in the sound, you know, where it just gets a bit bumpy in its dynamics, and this is just riding them out a touch, so not a big thing, but I think it's a worthy thing. And there we have that. So now let's look at the reverbs then. The reverbs are a biggie, and everyone's doing this, and I'm doing it too. We're using Sunset Sound IK multimedia plugins, and they've been in Sunset Sound and they've sampled the rooms, and they've I think it's probably using impulse responses to achieve this. So yeah, we're in Studio One Live Room, and that's the room sound I've used. Nothing really clever there. I mean, I've just rolled a little bit of bottom off, and I've chosen this particular position. I think there are different positioning options. You can actually, in that room there's just one position by the looks of it. Yeah, so that's exactly what's going on with that, and that's for the room sound. And then for the actual big chamber, this is the feature of Sunset Sound Studios. Every recording room has got a chamber room adjacent to it, and it's basically a plastered sort of chamber with a speaker in and some microphones. If I turn that round, you can see the mics. It's quite a cool little plug-in, and the door that would go through to the control room there as well, so that's nice, and the big speaker. So that's going on. Let's have a listen to that. So that's just the reverb, the chamber reverb. So it's pretty good. Sounds pretty Van Halen-y to me. I do a couple of things with the chamber reverb. I roll a bit of bottom off, a bit of top off, and then I make it sort of in tune with the instrument it's trying to replicate. And I felt that it was more in tune with the guitar if I give it a little mid-range bump there. Somewhere around there, it just makes it sound a bit super special, really. And then on the master bus, we've just got a few very small basic tweaks, a little bit of a treble lift, a bit of Ampex tape. There's a Neve compressor, which isn't doing very much at all, and then a limiter on the end. That's all we've got going on there. So I hope that's been useful to have a look behind the scenes on what I do to process that guitar sound. Alright, if you're still awake, I hope you found that interesting, stroke informative, or mildly entertaining. Please press like if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And there's a Patreon account if you'd like to come and hang with some of the backroom stuff. And a buy me a coffee if you want to just contribute a little bit to the running of the channel. It's all really appreciated, as is your views. So thank you for watching, and I shall see you on the next one.